Here are 5 things that I like to use when I create my RPG settings. All right, number 1, and I think the most important thing, is to make your world have a set piece. Now, what exactly does that mean? In one of my campaigns, there's this big giant ball of arcane energy called the static, and it brings a nice little bit of intrigue and mystery to the world, and the players really love it. So that's something that you could throw into your games. So number 2, always start with the surface level whenever you're creating your setting. So going back to the last point, an example of using the static is whenever I first started that campaign, I didn't exactly know what the static or this ball of arcane energy was. All I knew is that it was this cool arcane piece of energy that would disrupt the player's gameplay every once in a while. Didn't exactly have the history and everything figured out. Once the players started to show interest in things in the world, I started to make the history of the static fit what the players were interested in. Okay, number 3 is civilizations. Every setting needs a big city at least, but I'd like to break that down into even smaller groups of what civilization is. So the first one is a metropolis, so a huge big city. This may have been started with trade a long time ago. Maybe this is the first civilization that existed in this world. The second is a city, so a basic place that has everything a group of people may need. Next would be a town, so a little smaller than a city. And then a village. A village is a smaller collection of people. And something to remember for each of these groups, I have 5 things that you want to put in each of these cities, villages, or metropolises. The first thing is something for social, so these are like bars, parties, things to get your players interested in the world and interacting with other NPCs. The next thing that every city needs is political. Whenever I think political, I think elections, political unrest between the local government and the people. This adds a lot of drama to your game and may give your players a little motivation to interacting with your world. The next thing is economical. So how does this settlement, this city, this metropolis make money? Why is it here? Every town has a reason for being there, and usually it's economical. So maybe it's farming, maybe it's right next to an ocean, and maybe it's fishing. Maybe there's a mysterious forest right outside the city that has magical creatures, and the people like to hunt the magical creatures and trade them. The next thing is you want to think religious. There has to be a place for the paladin and the cleric to go visit, and people in towns worship gods. It's a big part of RPGs and D&D settings. And then finally is the military aspect of each of these. So this will be guards guarding the city from outside threats, to even just like a police force or some kind of force keeping the people civil. And number 4, you don't want to forget this one. This is things like deserts, mountains, things that aren't cities that are usually forgotten about. These kinds of things give you an opportunity to add lore to your world and give your players a lot of reason to explore and even reason to be careful when they're exploring, because maybe the deserts in the woods and the mountains are dangerous. And finally, but definitely not least, is make sure your world ties into your story. Your world is a great gateway into the rest of the lore of your story, so don't forget about that. Alright guys, so that was it. Hopefully this was helpful. If you're interested in more content like this, learning how to DM, or just want to listen to some guy talk about Dungeons and Dragons, go ahead and subscribe below and leave a comment on what you think is the most essential things in your RPG settings.